Okay, we're on air. Good morning to those in the West Coast, and good afternoon to those in the East Coast of the U.S., and good evening to the rest of the world. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Will Tu. I'm the Director of Embedded Segment Marketing for ARM. And what that means is I work tirelessly to evangelize ARM and work with the ecosystem on the deeply embedded markets such as automotive, appliances, industrial, and even the ever-popular Internet of Things. Today's Hangout is on the subject of sensor fusion and what it means to contextual awareness. We will spend about 30 minutes on the topic and hopefully get some good audience Q&A so that people can get their specific questions answered. Today we've assembled a distinguished group of panelists that will give you different insights from their perspective on the topic. Atmel certainly coming from more the MCU perspective, Sensor Tech obviously in a manufacturer of sensors, and Hillcrest, a software IP company that creates sensor fusion algorithms. And of course, each of them, these three companies actually collaborate together. They actually understand each other's technology. So they also have expertise in domains outside of their own focused area. But before we kick things off, let's let the panelists introduce themselves to you guys. So John, can you kind of kick things off?
Hi, my name is John Logan. I'm with Atmel. We make a whole range of microcontroller devices from M0s through to full MPU devices that are used in IoT and wearable applications. And my job is to support our sensor-based systems and sensor-based customers.
And I'm Marcelino.
Hello everyone, my name is Marcelino Gemelli. I head business development at Bosch Sensor Tech. Bosch Sensor Tech is one of the worldwide leaders of consumer MEMS, so the kind of sensors you find in your everyday phone: accelerometers, magnetometers, gyros, pressure, humidity, and gas sensors. I'm based in Silicon Valley, and I work in establishing partnerships with our development partners.
And Stephen.
Yes, so hello everyone, my name is Steve Shirey. I'm VP of Software Development at Hillcrest Labs. And as Will mentioned, we are a leading supplier of sensor processing software solutions in many different industries, including smart TV, mobile, wearable, Internet of Things, and the like. So happy to join you today.
Great, thank you guys. So kind of just to start off the discussion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a slide here. Just be patient with me on the Google Hangout, folks. And for some reason, here we go. Sharing a slide there. And what I'm sharing to the broader audience here is kind of an example of sensor fusion in the mobile space. And what you can see here on the very bottom is a sensor hub, and you have accelerometers, gyro, magnetometer, barometer, altimeter, and proximity sensors. And those kind of make up the typical sensor hub in a mobile phone. And of course, we start to see now that their sensor fusion is catching on in other devices, and we see them in wearables and things like that. But I guess I'd love for the panelists to kind of share their perspective and what does that mean for the embedded markets? Things like appliances. Any thoughts from any of you on that topic?
Yes, so it's John Logan here. It's been an interesting change in the way that sensor fusion has gone. There's a really big development with mobile phones, but the manufacturers of them tend to have very large software teams and develop their own algorithms. So they were looking for just very optimized hardware, and they would take it themselves from there. Whereas a lot of these appliance people, IoT kind of places, they have relatively small software teams, and they're really looking for already provided solutions for the sensors. They don't want to have to worry about how to make the sensors work. They want to worry about how to use the sensors and how to apply them. And so they're looking for people like the sensor vendors like Bosch and people like Hillcrest, the fusion developers, to provide ready solutions, ready to go, so they can really focus on the applications and what they do with the information that's provided, rather than having to work out how to get the data out of the sensors themselves.
So that's a great point, John. I've run into situations like that, and I guess Marcelino and Steve, I'd love to hear your perspective. It sounds like what John is saying, some of these deeply embedded markets lack the developer scale or the expertise to make those sensors work for them. What's your thoughts on that, Marcelino?
Yeah, you have similar requirements as technical requirements as the existing spaces. So you still have power that you want to minimize, and the code size that has to be small enough to be embedded into a small microprocessor. Because let's remember, most of these embedded devices and embedded algorithms, they have to be always on. Thus, the power is important. But at the same time, you have the push from the market that defines the use case. That there has to be, and there is, a lot of innovation on the actual use case, on what can and should be done when it comes to sensor fusion and context awareness. And once the innovation comes in and the ideas come from the user interface, user experience people, and so on, you want to be able to have the engineers drive to the solution in the shortest time possible, right? So time to market is a key that requires tools that are easy to use and some pre-packaged code that to some extent can provide you a pick-and-place software architecture which you then build on top of. Ideally, I would even call it an app store, but that's probably something for further down the road.
That's great, an app store. Yeah, I think that's something that we kind of need to help the embedded market. I think John's right in that, you know, there's needs to be more capability to enable people. I mean, Steve, isn't that where your company's tried to focus and help that market?
Absolutely. So we've tried to bring sensor processing software solutions, and in fact, you know, the way consumer electronics and hardware get developed is changing now with the likes of Kickstarter. You know, we've worked with a number of companies that have funded their development through Kickstarter, and they reach out to us because they just don't have the expertise in the sensors and what's needed to make them perform well in their products.
So I guess, what are some of the use cases, trends that we see in the embedded space, guys? I mean, you know, IoT, everybody talks about IoT, and I got to think that sensor fusion and contextual awareness is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big trends that we're seeing now is where historically you would use the motion sensors to track activity monitoring, but now they're getting multiple, and that was where sensor fusion started. Really was fusing the gyro and the accelerometer data to get motion. But now when you start to integrate that information with things like heart rate, so you know your activity and your heart rate at the same time, then it can provide much more insight into your level of fitness and your level of health, rather than just the simple activity tracking. So this fusion of different sources of data, I think, is really where a lot of the health and fitness tracking is going to go, and so that means that that we have to have systems whereby you can take software and algorithms from a motion sensing company, and then algorithms and software from a heart rate monitor company, and algorithms and software from, say, a UV light sensor company, and be able to integrate all of those. So that's the real challenge now, is all of these disparate sources. How do you integrate all of that information? And then the real value becomes, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you know, it's a challenge for these embedded developers. I mean, everybody talks about big data, small data, whatever you want, all these different sensors providing a lot of data. And I think for Bosch Sensor Tech, that's fantastic. Whether it's actually sensor fusion or not, that there's a big push to get a lot of data out there. But I mean, what do you guys see? I mean, you guys are experts. You guys have a lot of customers you're talking to. Without maybe giving away some of those key customer engagements, I mean, what are some of those emerging trends that you're starting to see in the sensor fusion or the contextual awareness area?
We are expanding the list of measurements that we measure. As John said, it all started from motion, so accelerometer, magnetometer, and gyro, to give you a spatial orientation and heading. Now, moving forward, we sold several hundred millions of pressure sensors, right? Contextual awareness now has altimetry, a barometric input as one of the key aspects of what sensor fusion is all about, right? To identify and locate people inside the building, for instance. Now, moving forward, we are expanding the types of data that we are sensing into humidity, volatile organic compounds, and other forms of gases and pollutants, and they help to shape a better explanation of the environment where the users are. And then there's the other big market, which is not just the personal market, right? Up to now, we tracked a lot the movement and the environment around people. But there's the machine-to-machine, or the so-called Industry 4.0 environment, whereby you retrofit existing pieces of machinery, identify how their motion or processing behaves over time, and see and interact for, say, preventive maintenance. That is a big topic. That's a big growing topic. Think about how many 20, 30-year-old machines that are around and will be around for still many years to come, and just retrofitting that production machinery. Another area is the agricultural and livestock management, right? They all provide new opportunities for low power, wirelessly connected, embeddable sources of data.
Well, I appreciate hearing about the low power. I mean, that's definitely a core competency of ARM. But Steve, I mean, you heard Marcelino kind of talk about some of the new sensors he's starting to see. I mean, what are the new sensors that might be the next big thing to be really incorporated into the future sensor fusion algorithms? I mean, in the industrial space or the wearable space, what sensors do you think are going to be additive or complementary to help drive contextual awareness beyond the accelerometer and the gyro and the ones that are in the mobile phone?
So let me take a different take on that, Will. So I agree with Marcelino. What we're seeing, the trend is that there's more and different types of sensors being put in all these embedded IoT type devices. But it's more than just the sensors, it's actually the intelligence being pushed down into these devices themselves. So it may not necessarily mean just all these new sensors, it could be the existing ones as well. So as an example, for like a robotic vacuum cleaner, Roomba is the big name in that, and those machines have typically been very dumb machines. They do this random walk in somebody's house to actually clean your carpet. But what we're seeing now is that these companies are actually putting smarts and sensors with cameras and accelerometers and gyros in these devices to do a more intelligent path of navigating around the house. And what they've discovered is researchers have found that when the device takes a more intelligent path, that people think it's doing a better job. Whether it really does a better job or not, it's actually really important. So that's just a sort of example of how sensors and intelligence are being pushed down into devices today.
So are we seeing? I mean, it sounds like I showed that diagram before. We had the sensor hub, and so what I'm hearing is not only are you still having a sensor hub in there to help that contemporary, but you're saying the sensors themselves are becoming more and more intelligent. Is that, in other words, there's some compute capability embedded into the sensor?
So what I'm saying is that from our perspective, a lot of the intelligence is outside the sensors themselves because it is a fusion problem. It's actually how do you put together the camera data with the accelerometer and gyro data, and for like a robotic vacuum cleaner, it has to know things like what's the inclination angle if it's going over a bump, and things like that, and it affects the algorithm. So it's actually at a higher layer.
Okay, so it's more at the hub level. It's outside of the sensor is where you see the intelligence. And what about that processing requirement, John? I mean, where do you see the trends going in for processing for these sensor hubs? Is it going up? Is it about the same? What do you think is the trend there for processing?
No, it's definitely going up. A lot of the applications now are requiring at least a kind of M4 capability device with a floating point unit, driving more and more towards M7. But what seems to be happening is that some of the base level algorithms are being pushed down into the sensors themselves. So, Bosch, for example, have a number of devices which will do the basic sensor fusion, but then the intelligence, the real intelligence of the system in the microcontroller is now processing more and more of that data. So it offloads a lot of the low-level stuff to the sensor itself, pulls some pre-processed data into it, and then you've got much more computing power available to really do something. And I always like to say it turns data into information. What you really want is information, and what the sensors are giving you is data. So the requirements to be able to do that are getting more and more stringent, and of course they want more and more computing power for less and less power, so that you get longer and longer battery life, because nearly all of these applications are going to run off a battery, and nobody wants to be recharging batteries frequently.
Okay, that's interesting. So do you see? I know you guys are a licensee of our Cortex M4, and I think recently you took the M7. Do you think the M7 is going to have a strong place in sensor fusion?
No, absolutely, and to be able to do more than just a sensor fusion, now you have a single chip that can do the sensor fusion and run displays and do much more complex processing than that. So there's a big push to get the silicon component count down in a lot of these devices, and that's one way of doing that. So you integrate the sensor hub in and give it more capability than just doing the managing the sensors.
Steve, do you see that as a trend too, where you're taking the host and the sensor hub and combining those together in a lot of these applications?
Absolutely. I think there's going to be a long life for things like the M7 core that ARM has developed, because we're definitely seeing a lot more processing being pushed down, and sort of the hub and host functionality being combined into one. It's definitely important for these consumer devices to reach scale, that they're actually able to find the price points that are necessary to deliver their functionality. And something like the ARM, the M7 provides the ability to not only handle the sensor processing load, but also the intelligence and the network connectivity needed in these IoT devices.
Okay, that's great. So just a reminder to those who are watching live, if you want to tweet to #ARM Hangout your questions, or go on our ARM community webpage and post your questions there. We would love to get some questions. I mean, we have the experts here for you today from Atmel and Sensor Tech and Hillcrest. I mean, here's your opportunity as a viewer. If you have some specific questions about sensor fusion, contextual awareness, or maybe just even for Atmel and Sensor Tech or Hillcrest and their area of expertise, we invite you to, again, tweet them to #ARM Hangout, and we will try to get those on there. So I've got a question that I think is maybe one reason why we're starting to have some challenges in the IoT space for sensor fusion is, how do you monetize in the field of sensor fusion and contextual awareness? I mean, isn't that going to be the big thing? If you can make money, you're going to go do it?
Yeah, maybe I can try and take this question. It's always a challenge, right? As to reach out to these smaller developers, right, that have limited capabilities in terms of of software and integration, not because they are not able, but simply because it is not their focus. Many companies focus on the use case, on the app, on the high-level user experience, and don't want to enter into the lower-level microcode that is required to have an efficient and integrated feature. So that's why companies such as Hillcrest, Atmel, and Bosch. I have an example here of the B&O 070, this tiny device. I guess you can barely see it. It's roughly 5 millimeters by 3.5 that contains a 9-axis Bosch sensor, the Atmel Cortex-M0 Plus, and the Hillcrest Sensor Fusion. So this on its own is a turnkey solution that you can put in the hands of customers and the hands of makers. Actually, there's maker boards for with this component available that are easy to plug in, turn the key, and get going right away. And then if you want to have, let's say, extra features, you can either work at a higher level, say, for instance, at the app level, or ask Hillcrest for some consulting activity that then can work and optimize whatever performance, whatever feature you want for those sensors. Again, my dream, I brought it up before, my dream is to have a kind of app store where developers, hardware vendors, and customers all meet together and interact and exchange money. That's how many software companies making apps for smartphones of different kinds actually monetized and changed the way we use mobile phones. I'm sure that the same kind of ecosystem would change the way that we use embedded systems.
Well, that's tremendous to hear. So the three of you have already collaborated in kind of creating that turnkey design. You know, I guess John and Steve, I'd love to hear from you guys in terms of, you know, that vision that Marcelino has been just shared with. Do you guys see that we're actually going to maybe, you know, have these type of apps, and that is it going to change the business model for like a company like Hillcrest or Atmel in sensor fusion?
So here at Atmel, we're already working on and have the start of that kind of app store available. So through our studio development environment, we have part of it is called the Atmel Gallery, and that really is an embedded app store, if you like. And for example, Bosch have projects and software that's available in that. And we have a number of other, not only sensor companies, but also communication companies that all have software that's available in that you can pull into the development tool to really start putting your full system together. So we've recognized that that's got to be a way that we go forward, because the software, the core software that's running these devices is coming from many, many different places. So we've got to be able to allow our customers that they want to focus on, as Marcelino said, they want to focus on the application, not on making the sensors work. That has got to be done. What was it? You know, they say that the number of these IoT and wearable devices is going to grow exponentially, but the number of developers is not going to grow exponentially. So we have to provide tools to allow them to go do that.
Steve, how do you guys work cohesively with the end application developers?
So yeah, just to layer on first what John had said, I also agree that it would be great if we can have some sort of environment where, you know, we can get these algorithms and such to different applications. It is a challenge. Like for instance, we sell this B&O 070 that Marcelino showed into both augmented reality and virtual reality markets. As it turns out, those sound very similar, but actually their performance requirements are quite different. So for a virtual reality system where you're moving around and looking at a 3D world, it has to be really smooth, very low latency, and it's okay if you're off a little bit, a number of degrees, because you're more concerned about motion sickness and in this immersive environment. Whereas in an augmented reality situation where you're overlaying objects in the physical world, you don't want to have errors where it's popping things up in the wrong places. So, although on the surface it seems like these are very similar solutions, they're actually a little bit different at the algorithm layer, and that makes it some challenging for us.
Okay, great. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I really would love for you guys to maybe each take a turn and really kind of give us your closing thoughts in terms of where do you see the future of sensor fusion and contextual awareness? What is the big potential thing that you will love to see embedded developers go do? I mean, whatever thought that you may have that you'd want to share with developers, I think it would be great. And so John, can you kind of lead us off?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple of real areas that are going to grow explosively in the near future, and where we need the developers to be able to focus. And one of them, Marcelino alluded to it earlier, and that's in the environmental monitoring. We have a lot of stuff going on activity monitoring, but environmental monitoring is becoming very important with these VOC, these volatile organic compound sensors, with pollution monitors, with particulate monitors, to know that what the state of your local environment is going to be. And to incorporate these into things like baby monitors, so you know that the room that your children are sleeping in is good and clean. There's a lot of development work going to go in those areas. And then further on from that, is the transition away from just fitness monitoring to true health monitoring, and then moving into diagnostics and therapeutics. There's more and more trend for people to be able to wear EKG monitors, for example, continuously, so that you can get pre-warnings if there are problems occurring. So I think that that this whole movement away from just fitness monitoring into true health and diagnostics, I think, is one of the major thrust areas for the next 5 years.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Marcelino?
Yeah, to piggyback on what John said, the real opportunity is when you can take information and make actionable use out of it. And that's what Internet of Things is all about, right? It doesn't just take to collect all the data on environment, on health and motion, but you have to be able to come up with something for it. So I really have a high faith and high hopes in the industrial designers, in the device designers, to come up with new use cases that then will trickle down into requirements for the software developers and the hardware developers to make it happen. The toolbox is growing in terms of the measurements that can be sensed, and the toolbox is growing in terms of the capacity of the embedded software versus power. Right? So every year we move the limit further ahead, and industrial designers are taking advantage of that. And I can see this trend accelerating, hopefully. Okay,
good. Steve, how about your closing thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, because I definitely echo everything that John and Marcelino said, in that really the value of these sensors and the fusion and the contextual awareness is when it gets integrated into a holistic user experience that provides value to the end user or end customer of the product. So today we know that many fitness bands are basically stopped being used after a number of months, because the notion of just tracking your steps that you take throughout the day isn't useful enough for people to derive value from. But as we add other information in terms of your heart rate, your sleep patterns, and if we can provide information feedback to the user to say, hey, based on your context, we know that you're not sleeping well because you haven't been exercising, and if you do this, then you'll actually be feeling better throughout the day. When it gets linked back into the user experience, where it derives benefit to the user, that's when the greatest value comes. And I think that the smarts and the intelligence and the fusion of all this information together is what is going to pull that together for these consumer devices.
Awesome. You know, I really appreciate the three of you. I mean, my takeaway from what some of you guys said is that clearly in kind of the wearable space, you see this evolution of capability coming up. So things are getting better and more significant and actually having a more impactful utilization for the end user. And then I think, as Marcelino kind of talked about, there's some new markets for sensor fusion in the kind of the industrial space. And it sounds like gas and chemical sensors are on the forefront now, not just the position and inertial type of sensing, but now we are expanding the horizon of what kind of sensing that can be done to augment the capability of sensor fusion. So it sounds like to me that's where some of the innovation from what you guys are saying is both moving up in terms of the capability of the algorithms, but also in now the broadening of more sensors to add to the capability of what you can fuse together. So it sounds like Internet of Things, embedded devices, there's going to be a lot more growth in this particular space. So I think for all three of you, it sounds like the potential is very, very high for your company's subsequent growth. I think that's fantastic, and obviously for ARM as well. So, but again, would like to thank each of you for the time that you guys took today, and hopefully we'll be doing another hangout and bringing value to the embedded community in the future as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yep. Thanks, Will. Thanks, everybody.